Hello, my name is Paul Marchbanks, and this is Digging in the Dirt, with another cinematic mashup of films old and new. Today I'll be saying a few words about the work of modern independent filmmaker Alex Garland, as well as the 1965 film Bonheur, Happiness in English, by French New Wave director Agnes Varda. The concept of sin, the notion that certain selfish actions are wrong because they carry a spiritual as well as a social cost, is foreign to a lot of us in the 21st century. When identifying the source of poor behavior, we usually point to environmental causes and biological imperatives, minimizing blame even as we invite the expected benefits of counseling and re-education. Though, admittedly, it's more difficult to downplay the wrongness of conduct that harms ourselves, modern psychologists and biologists routinely take the edge off hurtful behavior by theorizing both aggression and selfishness. We downplay culpability for rudeness, lying, and arrogance by pointing to survival instincts, and even slow the rush to judge crimes like theft and murder by spotlighting extenuating circumstances. When it comes to sexual aggression, however, there's a greater willingness to use the word evil, regardless of the context. Insensitive jokes laced with lewd suggestions, the objectification of female bodies, and sexual assault collectively marginalize and sometimes tragically immobilize women who fear realizing their full potential because earlier efforts have been hamstrung by sexism. The popular phrase toxic masculinity originates with men in the 80s involved in serious self-examination, attempting to separate out archetypes like the warrior and wild man from a constellation of destructive traits that had long orbited masculinity. Books like Robert Bly's Iron John, a book about men, argued in 1984 that self-discipline and sobriety could coexist with an adventurous spirit, one willing to explore the depths of one's own emotions, become a more present active father figure, and even encourage the sort of risky initiation rituals that for centuries helped boys in various cultures take on the active responsibilities required of adults. In more recent years, toxic masculinity has become a useful shorthand for gender-based condescension, hostility, and physical aggression, problems often traceable to malformed or unhealthily expressed sexual impulses. Alex Garland is one of those modern filmmakers determined to spotlight gendered, harmful expressions of desire and power whenever possible. He tends to tackle the subject in unambiguous terms, painting a picture of male, heterosexual lust and self-interest in rather broad strokes. Ex Machina, his first film from 2014, spins a futuristic but eerily relevant yarn about a technological genius who develops female androids so lifelike that they can pass the Turing test. If a self-isolated, sexually dissatisfied guy could develop sentient machines and had the freedom to shape their appearance, would he create beings with a wide array of temperaments, backstories, and body types, or would he create female simulacrums whose looks and behavior adhere to some narrowly defined private fantasy? The question has been asked in film for a century now, in films like Fritz Lang's Metropolis, Brian Forbes' The Stepford Wives, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and, more comically, John Hughes' Weird Science. Ex Machina provides a very clear answer to this question. Apparently, such men wouldn't hesitate to realize their preferences in tangible, exceedingly compliant form. How many of us would choose to skirt the challenges of dealing with an actual human being with their variable emotions and conflicting opinions if the option presented itself? Imagine a partner or harem of partners who never disagree with you, are ready to jump in bed anytime you're in the mood, and have no interest in either retribution or grueling conflict resolution when you mistreat them. In Ex Machina, our resident genius explores the full range of the freedoms he's granted himself, alternately wooing and abusing, both emotionally and physically, his very realistic, self-conscious mechanical companions. Garland's Men from 2022 disturbs with not only gruesome content reminiscent of the body horror in a David Cronenberg feature, but with the audacious suggestion that most, if not all men, are complicit in the range of toxic behaviors on display in this very unsettling story. He did choose the plurality of men, after all, rather than more targeted alternatives like man or, say, a few horrible men, which might have instead implied that what we witness on screen is merely the peculiar behavior of some oddballs living in a remote English village well outside the reach of civilization. Instead, Garland's third film collects a loose band of males, young and old, who with the help of makeup and some digital wizardry are incomprehensibly brought to life by a single actor, the chameleon Rory Kinnear, characters who, despite their differences of age and profession, share a remarkable disrespect for the one female in their midst. The film traces the efforts of a newly single woman to process some recent trauma in an idyllic locale far removed from the site of all her troubles, an attempt complicated repeatedly by male locals who alternatively stalk her, fling offensive insults at her, threaten her bodily, dismiss her pleas for help, and, in a stunning moment of betrayal, win her trust only to betray it seconds later. The most distressing aggression, however, appears in the film's opening and is leveled at our hero by her own spouse. The protagonist's abusive husband threatens to kill himself by jumping off the top of their apartment building if she leaves him. The sort of warped, sadistic manipulation one might expect from someone struggling with a severe pathology, not a partner professing unending allegiance. Women are in short supply in Garland's Civil War from 2024, and no, I'm not ignoring the fact that our two central characters are women, or that the tale's final, definitive, and rather violent act is carried out by a secondary female character. I'm referring to the absence of women from the various enclaves of brutal men who confront our heroes as they travel from New York City to Washington, D.C. across a war-torn country. Violent men whose aggression might be traceable to frustrated sexual impulses they lack the self-discipline to sublimate have taken to subverting the order of law at will, targeting those they dislike whenever the fancy strikes them. Some gruesomely torture high school acquaintances. Others coldly eliminate people of color from foreign countries. And a few soldiers, convinced of the righteousness of their cause, execute enemy combatants with neither hesitation nor compunction. French filmmaker Agnes Varda is committed to exposing the many perils of machismo too, but declines to build her critique atop violence and abuse in the film Happiness. Instead, she constructs a more subtle critique of toxic masculinity by assembling an array of very different masculine modes and then allowing them to play off one another. Four men of varying ages work together in a woodshop where they talk freely about their differing perspectives on romance. The owner, a married, middle-aged man who allows a work cabinet to be papered with pinups of Brigitte Bardot and other half-naked women, appears content to stay at home with his wife and the kids, providing an industrious and faithful standard against whom the younger workers in the shop can be measured. The unnamed teenager in the group protests that he only wants one good woman, a position that a looser co-worker, John, considers a testament to the boy's naivete and inexperience. Once he's enjoyed one woman, says the older man, he'll want many more. It's not hard to imagine the careless, often rebellious, and usually virile cinematic heroes of Varda's male contemporaries uttering such a line. John's own sideburns, he jokes, force him to burn through one partner after another. Companions he indelicately classes as dolls, akin to those one might collect on a shelf. Francois, our central male character, considers John a real rabbit, declaring his own preference for fidelity. "I'm not capricious," he protests. "When I love, I can't stop. The declaration sounds like a pretty admirable profession of devotion, the sort of commitment many of us continue to daydream about even when life has convinced us it's hard to find. Which of these masculinities comes out on top in Varda's film? I suppose it depends on how you define victory, whether you value monogamy, and if you think happiness, a concept bandied about regularly by the characters, more important than the kind of deep joy that requires sacrificing some of those impulses that promise to bring us temporary pleasure. This film, which continues to divide critics today as it divided audiences upon its release, has been read by some as romanticizing philandering, while others have found in it a searing critique of those socially palatable forms of sexism which clothe themselves in kind words, gentle gestures, and seemingly meaningful eye-gazing, all the while disguising a ravenous self-interest that refuses to say no to its own cravings. What do you think Agnes Varda has attempted to express with this infuriatingly subtle film? And do you agree with the conclusions she appears to reach? And, if you've seen some of Alex Garland's work, do you think Varda's film a useful complement to the sort of critiques that Garland levels at toxic masculinity?